The Eclipse Fong's once imposing corridors were now a battleground. Alarms blared, and sparks flew from damaged consoles as the Resistance's virus wreaked havoc on the flagship systems. Doors locked and unlocked at random, security turrets turned on their own soldiers, and the ship's artificial gravity fluctuated wildly. Amid the chaos, Raven and Ghost moved with precision, using the confusion to their advantage. Escape from the Queen's grasp. Raven and Ghost sprinted through the maze-like hallways, dispatching Draconian soldiers who attempted to block their path. Though outnumbered and outgunned, they pressed on, driven by sheer determination. "Raven, where are we heading?" Ghost panted, her mechanical arm sparking from a near-miss plasma shot. "The Central Core," Raven replied, glancing at his wrist device, which displayed a rapidly updating map of the ship. "We take out their experimental power system, and this entire ship goes dark. It'll buy the fleet enough time to finish the job." "And us?" Ghost asked. Raven smirked grimly. "We'll figure that out after we're not dead." Xylaris strikes back. In the command center, Queen Xylaris fought to regain control. Her advisors and engineers worked frantically, trying to isolate the virus, but it spread faster than they could counter it. "Divert power to internal defenses." Xylaris barked, her voice sharp and commanding. "Seal off the core, don't let them reach it." "Your Majesty," one of her tacticians stammered, "the virus has overridden the security protocols. We've lost control of the bulkheads." Xylaris's tail lashed in fury, striking a nearby console and shattering it. "Then I'll handle this myself," she growled. "Prepare my guard." Donning her battle armor, the Queen strode out of the command center, her elite guards falling into step behind her. If Raven thought he could destroy her ship, he would learn just how wrong he was. The heart of the ship. Raven and Ghost reached the Central Core, a massive chamber dominated by a pulsating energy sphere suspended within a lattice of alien metal. The sphere emitted an eerie, shifting glow, casting long shadows across the room. The experimental power system was the Dominion's attempt to replicate the Heartstone, a dangerous, unstable prototype that could devastate the Resistance fleet if fully activated. "That's bigger than I expected," Ghost muttered. "Focus," Raven said, pulling a small device from his belt. "We overload the core, set the charge, and get out." As they approached the console, the doors behind them slammed open, and Xylaris entered, flanked by her guards. Her armor gleamed in the dim light, and her eyes burned with hatred. "You've gone far enough," she hissed, her voice echoing through the chamber. "This ends here, human." Raven and Ghost exchanged a glance. "I don't suppose you'll just let us blow this up and leave?" Ghost quipped. Xylaris sneered. "You'll find no mercy here." The final battle. The fight was brutal and unrelenting. Xylaris moved with inhuman speed and strength, her claws slicing through the air as she targeted Raven. Her guards engaged Ghost, who fought with desperate ferocity, using her mechanical arm to parry their attacks. Raven dodged a swipe from Xylaris, rolling across the floor and coming up with his blade in hand. He lunged at her, but she sidestepped effortlessly, her tail whipping around to knock him off balance. "You're outmatched," Xylaris taunted, her voice cold. "You were a fool to challenge me." "Maybe," Raven said, dodging another strike, "but fools get lucky sometimes." As the Queen raised her claws for a killing blow, Ghost slammed into her from the side, her mechanical arm locking around Xylaris's throat. The Queen snarled, throwing Ghost aside with terrifying strength, but the distraction was enough for Raven to reach the console. He activated the device, and the core began to hum ominously. Alarms blared, and the sphere's glow intensified, cracks spreading across its surface. "What have you done?" Xylaris roared, her composure finally cracking. "Set the timer," Raven shouted to Ghost. "We need to move." Sacrifice and survival. The core's countdown began as Raven and Ghost fought their way out of the chamber. Xylaris, blinded by rage, pursued them, ignoring the warning signs flashing all around her. As the humans reached the hangar, they found a damaged Draconian fighter, barely functional, but it would have to do. Ghost climbed into the cockpit, her fingers flying over the controls. "It's not going to hold," she said, grimacing. "Then we'll make it hold," Raven replied, strapping in beside her. Behind them, Xylaris appeared in the hangar, her eyes locked on Raven. "You won't escape me," she snarled, leaping toward the fighter as it began to lift off. But before she could reach them, the core detonated. The aftermath. The explosion ripped through the Eclipse Fong, consuming the flagship in a blinding burst of energy. Raven and Ghost's stolen fighter was flung into space, its systems barely holding together as they hurtled away from the wreckage. On the Resistance's flagship, cheers erupted as the Eclipse Fong was destroyed. The Draconian fleet, now leaderless and in disarray, retreated from the sector. But Raven sat silently in the fighter, staring out at the drifting debris. "She's not dead," he said quietly. Ghost glanced at him. "How can you be sure?" "Because someone like her doesn't die that easily," Raven replied, his voice grim. "And when she comes back, we'll be ready." Far away, in the darkness of space, a lone escape pod drifted silently. Inside, Queen Xylaris opened her eyes, her fury burning brighter than ever. The destruction of the Eclipse Fong was a devastating blow to the Draconian Dominion, but Queen Xylaris's fury burned brighter than the wreckage of her flagship. From the cramped confines of her escape pod, she reached out across the Dominion's encrypted communication network. Her survival was a secret for now, but she intended to use that to her advantage. The pod drifted into the shadow of an uninhabited moon where a concealed station waited. This station, codenamed Ebon Claw, housed Xylaris's most loyal agents and Black Ops operatives. Here she would rebuild, plot, and unleash her vengeance. Whispers of betrayal. On the Resistance's asteroid base, Sanctuary, the mood was both celebratory and tense. The destruction of the Eclipse Fong had shifted the tide of war, and the Dominion was struggling to regroup. Yet, Raven couldn't shake the feeling that Xylaris wasn't truly gone. "You're obsessed," Ghost said, leaning against a bulkhead in their command room. Her mechanical arm clicked softly as she adjusted its settings. "She's probably dead, along with her shiny ship." Raven shook his head, staring at a holographic map of the galaxy. "She's not dead. She's too smart, too ruthless to let herself be taken down so easily." Before Ghost could reply, an alert flashed on the console. A signal, faint and heavily encrypted, was coming from deep within Dominion territory. It wasn't just any signal. It carried fragments of a Resistance encryption, one that had been retired months ago. "Someone's trying to reach us," Raven muttered, his mind racing. "But how did they get our codes?" Ghost frowned. "Could be a trap. Or it could be someone inside the Dominion," Raven said, his voice sharpening. "Someone willing to turn." The Queen's spy. The signal originated from a Dominion-controlled industrial world called Karak 7. Once a bustling hub of commerce, it was now a heavily militarized factory planet, churning out weapons and ships for the war effort. Raven and Ghost, disguised as traders, infiltrated the planet to investigate the source of the signal. In the shadows of a bustling marketplace, they met their contact, a nervous young Draconian named Vyrn. His scales were pale, and his eyes darted nervously as he handed Raven a data chip. "You don't know what it's like," Vyrn whispered. "The Queen, she's changed. Ever since the destruction of the Heartstone, she's been unstable. She's planning something worse than anything you've seen before." "What kind of plan?" Raven asked, his voice low. "She's rebuilding in secret," Vyrn replied. "A new weapon. It's not just a fleet, it's a system-wide annihilation protocol. She calls it Eclipse Reborn. If she activates it, entire planets will burn." Before Raven could press for more, the sound of boots echoed nearby. Dominion soldiers stormed the marketplace, their weapons drawn. "You've been followed," Vyrn hissed. "Go. I'll cover you." The Queen's vision. Back at Ebon Claw, Xylaris stood before a massive holographic projection of a star system. Her engineers and scientists were hard at work, crafting the weapon that would bring her ultimate revenge, Eclipse Reborn. It wasn't a ship, but a planetary-scale weapon capable of harnessing the energy of stars and turning them into destructive supernovas. "We will make them fear us again," Xylaris said, her voice calm but cold. "The humans think they've won a victory. They think they can defy us. But when they see what I've created, they'll know the true meaning of despair." One of her advisors hesitated. "Your Majesty, the energy requirements for such a weapon are irrelevant," Xylaris snapped. "We will harness what we need. No cost is too great for our vengeance." A race against time. Raven and Ghost returned to Sanctuary with the data chip. Inside were detailed blueprints of Xylaris's new weapon and the location of Ebon Claw. The Resistance now faced a dire choice: strike at the Queen's hidden base, knowing it was likely a trap, or risk giving her time to finish Eclipse Reborn. The Resistance Council convened, tension high as they debated the next move. Some argued for caution, while others urged immediate action. Raven stood at the center of the room, his voice cutting through the noise. If we wait, she'll finish this weapon, and we won't have a chance to stop her. We've hit her before, and we can do it again. But we need to act now. Ghost nodded. He's right. We've already lost too many lives. We can't let her finish this thing. Reluctantly, the council agreed. The resistance began preparations for a full-scale assault on Ebon Claw. But Raven knew the mission would be their most dangerous yet. The assault on Ebon Claw. The resistance fleet arrived at Ebon Claw under the cover of a nearby nebula, their ships cloaked and weapons primed. As the fleet approached, the station's defenses sprang to life. Massive turrets fired bursts of plasma, and squadrons of Draconian fighters swarmed the human ships. Raven and Ghost led a strike team to infiltrate the station, their goal clear. Disable the core powering Eclipse Reborn and ensure it could never be used. Inside the station, the team faced relentless resistance. Draconian soldiers fought with ferocity, determined to protect their queen. But the resistance pushed forward, using every tactic at their disposal. As they neared the core, Raven's wrist communicator beeped. It was a message from VYRN. "She's waiting for you," the message read. "It's a trap." The Queen's final stand. Raven and his team burst into the core chamber, only to find it empty, except for Xylaris. She stood at the center of the room, clad in new, sleek battle armor that pulsed with energy. "You've come far, human," she said, her voice echoing through the chamber. "But this is where your rebellion ends." The battle that followed was unlike any Raven had faced. Xylaris' armor amplified her strength and speed, and the room itself seemed to respond to her commands, with energy surges and automated defenses turning the environment into a death trap. But Raven fought with everything he had, knowing that failure wasn't an option. As the Queen unleashed a devastating attack, Ghost managed to reach the core, planting an explosive charge. "It's set," she shouted. "We need to go." The core chamber of Ebon Claw erupted into chaos as Xylaris' enhanced armor blazed with raw power. Raven ducked beneath a surge of energy, the heat searing the air around him. Ghost was already retreating toward the exit, the timer on the explosive core ticking down. "Raven, we have 60 seconds. Ghost yelled over the din, "This place is going to blow." Raven didn't respond. His attention was locked on Xylaris, whose eyes burned with fury. Her claws sparked as she lunged at him, faster than he could react. She struck, sending him sprawling across the chamber floor. "You've come so far, only to fail," Xylaris sneered, standing over him. "Did you truly think you could defeat me, human?" Raven groaned, clutching his side as he pulled himself to his feet. His breathing was labored, but his green eyes remained defiant. "It's not about me defeating you," he said. "It's about making sure you don't destroy anyone else." Xylaris laughed coldly. "How noble. But your resistance ends here." A desperate gamble. Raven glanced at the timer on his wrist. 20 seconds. He needed to keep Xylaris distracted long enough for the explosion to take her and Eclipse Reborn down. "You're right," Raven said, stepping toward her. "The resistance ends here, if you can stop me." Xylaris tilted her head, intrigued by his boldness. "A final stand, then?" "Very well, human. I'll grant you the honor of dying by my hand." She lunged again, but this time, Raven was ready. Using a grappling device from his belt, he shot a cable toward the ceiling and swung upward, narrowly avoiding her strike. The move bought him precious seconds as the timer ticked closer to 0. "Ghost, get out of here." Raven shouted into his calm. "What about you?" Ghost's voice crackled back. "Just go," he barked. "I'll find a way." The core explodes. At the 5-second mark, Xylaris realized Raven's plan. Her eyes darted toward the core, its surface cracking as energy surged within. "No," she screamed, abandoning her fight with Raven and rushing toward the core. But it was too late. The core detonated in a blinding flash of light. The explosion ripped through Ebon Claw, consuming the station in a chain reaction of destruction. Ships outside were buffeted by the shockwave as debris hurtled into space. Ghost's ship emerged from the chaos, its systems barely holding together. She stared at the wreckage through the viewport, her hands trembling on the controls. "Raven," she whispered. Survival against all odds. Amid the drifting debris, a damaged escape pod floated silently. Inside, Raven coughed and winced as he unstrapped himself. He had managed to leap into the pod moments before the explosion, but the force of the blast had left him battered and bruised. "Still alive," he muttered, wincing in pain. "Barely." Activating the pod's distress beacon, he leaned back and closed his eyes, exhaustion overtaking him. Xylaris's fate. Far from the core chamber, in a heavily shielded section of the station, Xylaris opened her eyes. Her armor had absorbed much of the blast, but even it couldn't fully protect her. She staggered to her feet, her body aching and her pride shattered. The station was in ruins, and her dream of Eclipse reborn lay in pieces. But Xylaris was not defeated. She would survive. She always survived. As the remnants of the station crumbled around her, she activated a hidden transponder. A stealth ship appeared moments later, its crew loyal to her above all else. "I'm not done," Xylaris whispered, her voice venomous. "Not yet." Aftermath. The destruction of Ebon Claw was a turning point in the war. The Resistance celebrated their victory, but the cost was heavy. Hundreds had died in the assault, and Raven was still missing. Back at Sanctuary, Ghost paced the command room, her mind racing with thoughts of her friend. Suddenly, an alert blared across the room. "Incoming transmission," an operator said. The screen lit up, and Raven's face appeared. He looked tired and injured, but alive. "Miss me?" he said, managing a weak smile. Ghost exhaled a shaky breath, relief washing over her. "You're late," she said, smirking. "As usual." A new war begins. Though Ebon Claw was gone, the Dominion remained a powerful enemy. Xylaris, now more dangerous than ever, plotted her revenge in the shadows. The Resistance had won a major battle, but the war was far from over. Raven, standing on the bridge of the Resistance's new flagship, gazed out at the stars. "This fight isn't over," he said to Ghost, who stood beside him. "She's still out there, and we'll be ready for her," Ghost replied, her mechanical arm gleaming in the light. Raven nodded, determination in his eyes. "Let her come." The end. For now, ****.